Hello, welcome to the Winning Balance podcast. I am met with a guest that I had met recently, and you guys are going to laugh when you hear the story of how I met this kind gentleman here. Stan Ricks is such a good human being. I've had the pleasure of meeting him a little bit, and then also hearing your podcast on Casey's podcast. I feel like I have an understanding of the kind of guy you are, and I look forward to getting to know you even more. So I'm excited to have you on.
Cool. It's great to meet you. Great to talk to you anyway. Yeah, we did meet. My recollection is I'm kind of famous at our country club for I run the golf course. I play speed golf in the mornings.
Yeah.
And I think Tanner and his buddy were behind me, and I was playing two balls. A lot of times I played two balls. I was way over to the side, kind of hanging off.
You were I
was looking for a ball. Yeah, I was looking for a ball. Yeah, on number 16, I think, or 15 at Riverside. And I kind of waved Tanner and his buddy through, and they were about 150 yards behind me. Tanner hits the ball, and it is like an RPG. It was like headed right towards me. I go, holy crap. I had to duck down. It goes, right by my head. I go, oh. And then Tanner comes up, oh, I'm so sorry. I said, okay, it's all right. But your ball's right here. I found your ball for you, as I recollect, right?
Yeah,
and then we found mine.
Exactly.
So it worked out great.
In my head, Stan, I'm thinking, whatever you do, don't hit it at this guy. That's literally the only thing that I'm thinking of is you're plenty left. You don't need to stress about it. Don't.
I was way left.
Yeah,
you were way right. I was way left.
Yeah. So duck hook it directly at you. I was like, and then I found out you run Sundance Bay, which we'll get into your bio. And I'm like, I literally almost killed one of the guys
Exactly.
of Sundance Bay. That would not be a good intro. So yeah, that's our story. And then even to fast forward a little bit, I have to make fun of myself on this. In my third year of golf, I'm learning it. I'm obsessed with the game, but I am still a rookie by all means. And this is more of the buddy that I was with. I hit my practice swing and the ball goes flying through our cart. You remember that part?
Yeah,
and
I do.
now
It was just, I think it was next shot, as I recollect.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. I go, holy moly.
So Rick's like,
Make sure we really are far behind Tanner, for sure.
So if you're golfing with Tanner, make sure you are plenty yards away. Even if you think you're safe, you're probably not.
That's right.
Goodness. So that's how I met Stan. But a quick bio on Stan. Mr. Ricks is a co-founder and managing director of Sundance Bay, and he has over 30 years of real estate development and investing experience. During his career, he has bought, sold, managed, leased, built, and capitalized on over $500 million in real estate ventures. Mr. Ricks was formerly the CEO of Trophy Homes, where he built over 2,000 homes during his tenure with the company. He is a current owner and or investor in office buildings, retail centers, mobile home parks, residential land, and multifamily properties. Additionally, Mr. Ricks has been an early investor in several startup companies such as Omniture, Zuka Juice, and Altius Health Plan. Stan received his bachelor's in estate and financial planning from Brigham Young University, where he taught from 2000 to 2011 as an adjunct professor teaching advanced real estate development and investing courses.
That's pretty accurate. It's probably a little bit old. It's probably, honestly, more like $2 billion now, at least. Yeah, that's probably an old resume.
I'm sure. Yeah, I pulled it up from Sundance.
Probably, yeah. We have to update that a little bit because it's been a lot more since then.
And I need to get that confirmed with you. So $2 billion
at least, in real estate. At least, yeah. Because just in our debt fund alone, we've done over $2 billion in lending. And then in our equity side, we've done billion-ish or more, et cetera. So, and actually I've been doing real estate. That is probably a little bit old. That was probably about 10 years old because I've been doing it for 40 years now.
Good for you.
I started developing actually for kind of first real estate deals I did. I was about 25, 26. I was just kind of a year or two out of school. And it started. I was doing financial planning at the time, and and we did a real estate, did a little apartment rehab deal, a 24-unit apartment rehab deal in Provo. And
right out of college, you did that.
Yeah, we were about a year out. And my partner and I, and had a couple other partners on it. And then we actually, the way I really got into real estate development was when I did financial planning. My partner and I, we got tired. We were at a office park that had real narrow parking stalls. And I had this BMW, he had a little Mercedes, and we kept getting our doors dinged, dinged by other people's doors. Our cars dinged. We go, oh, we gotta get a new office where we have wider parking stalls. That was the motivation to start. Is we got to build our own office building and have wider parking stalls so our cars don't get dinged. And so we ended up buying a piece of property up on North University Avenue in Provo. And we originally just wanted to build get 1 acre and build an office building and lease out some of it and keep it ourselves. And the city wouldn't rezone just 1 acre. This is North University Avenue. Back at University Avenue now is busy and lots of commerce all the way along there. Back then it was kind of out there. This was in 1985. Mm-hmm. And we ended up buying like 7 acres and becoming developers. And what we call Jamestown Square is the office complex on University Avenue, which we still own and operate now. And that was, at the time, it was one of the largest office complexes in the state. It was like 160,000 square feet. We built it over 6 or 7 years.
That was one of your first projects.
Yeah, that was the first. I mean, other than this little apartment, that was kind of our first real project. And, people would say, well, I was like 28, been married for about a year. And I still remember I had a couple uncles and my mom would say, well, how do you know what you're doing here? I go, well, we don't, but we can figure it out. We're figuring it out as we go along, And they say, well, you can go broke. My uncle you can go broke doing this. I go, yeah, you can go broke, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, So we ended up building one building at a time and plugging through. We had three active partners and one investor partner, and ended up building out that project over about 6 or 7 years. And back then, back in the 80s, this is our first loan we did on that project was our construction loan was like prime +2, and prime was like 18% at the time. Or 16 or 17. It had been up as 21, and it had come down a little bit. And then a long-term loan, we had to literally scour the country to try and find a real estate loan. And we ended up getting it from an outfit out of Philadelphia. And it was 14.75%. That was our interest rate on our long-term financing. And we were doing backflips. We got a loan. It was amazing.
People can't complain these days.
Yeah, well, and then so by the time we actually closed, interest rates had come down a little bit, and we ended up closing, I think, at 12.5, and then we refinanced it again probably 3 or 4 years later at 10.5. Refinanced it again a couple of years later at 8, and then at 6, and then at 4, and then we actually refinanced again about 6, 7 years ago, I think at 2.5 or 2.75 or something like that. We locked that baby in for as long as we could.
Oh, that's free money, lower than inflation.
But, so when people complain about, oh man, 6% interest rate, I go, welcome to the real world, guys,
Exactly.
And so that was the first project, and I did financial planning, and then actually after we built that project, we actually started a video company as well, a video rental kind of chain.
Blockbuster.
Yeah, except we were doing it in grocery stores.
Interesting.
We were doing it in a friend had started. He did some in Albertsons, and then we did it in several other grocery store chains like Butteries and IGAs and several others. We ended up with about 120 video stores inside these grocery stores, video rental stores. So between the video and Jamestown was up and going then, I decided I really liked entrepreneurship and development, real estate development, better than financial planning. So I sold my financial planning business to my partner, and it was, I really had great relationships with a lot of my clients. But it was kind of sad to go in some ways. I really enjoyed financial planning. I liked the financial planning process and the relationships you build with people. But I ended up starting a little home building company. I had a friend who lived in Las Vegas. He and I had been friends at BYU. And interestingly enough, we were both engaged to the same girl at different times. That's how we kind of got to know each other. That's a whole other story. But anyway, so he had lived in Las Vegas, and he was interested in maybe just, doing. Las Vegas was booming at the time. It was just really taking off, and so we went down there and started doing a little home building business. That's great. Called Trophy Homes, and we first year or two we built 20, 30 homes, and we went to 50, and eventually expanded up to about 400 homes a year down there, and eventually sold that business in 2006. And in the meantime, we'd started
Trophy. Time to sell it, probably, right?
Yeah, in hindsight, it was a great time to sell. I mean, it wasn't we were geniuses on it. I was worried about the Las Vegas market because it had gone from the houses we were selling in the early 90s for $125,000. We were selling pretty much the same house for like $350, 15 years later. And I was just worried it couldn't, how long could this go? Then we started Trophy in Utah as well in the early 90s, primarily focused on condos and townhome attached housing. And we were up to about 350, 400 homes a year here in Utah as well. And but we had, for Vegas, we got an unsolicited offer we couldn't refuse. And so we ended up selling that to a larger company. And in hindsight, we looked like geniuses. But unfortunately, we did not sell a Utah operation, and we got crushed. The Utah market tanked in 2008. I didn't think the Utah market had gone up, but not doing as much as Vegas and some of those other areas. And I just didn't think that the market was going to be that bad here. And but the business basically died overnight. I mean, the home building business, we were building and selling 30 homes a month, 30, 35 homes a month in like 2007 and early 2008. And in April of 2008, we had sold we closed 18 or sold 18. In May, it was 9. And in June, it was 2. Goodness. In July, it was just flatlined. Flatlined. I mean, the market just did. And we had a number of our banks that we met with just came to us in April, started in April. They said, we can't fund anymore. We can't fund your construction loans. And I remember the first bank, they called me and said, we had a project in St. George, and they said, we can't fund any more construction draws. I said, well, how are we supposed to build the project? Homes are 3/4 built, right? And they said, find another bank. There's no other bank. Nobody's going to step in and do that. And we tried, but I said, why can't you fund anymore? He said, you're a bank. You're supposed to have money. Yeah. They said the FDIC is taking control of or they're watching us real closely. They won't let us fund anymore because we're out of money. And 3 weeks later, they got taken over by the FDIC. And then over the next 3 months, we had 2 or 3 other banks got taken over by the FDIC, and everything just died. I mean, it was literally completely dead.
Which is insane.
You couldn't sell a house. You couldn't finance a house. You couldn't give them away. And I just continue what happened there, and the genesis of what happened there was, I just started. I had 2 partners that both bailed on me, and here in Utah, and one moved out in the middle of the night. Never seen him since, and moved to Florida, and basically turned over the stock to me. Stock worthless company at that point, and kind of blamed it all on me. It was my fault. I said me and Ben Bernanke and George Bush and everybody else. I mean, it was ridiculous. And the whole market had just collapsed. And the first 6 months, it was hard to avoid being curled up in a ball, and just trying to say, what do we do, And I had over 100 employees. We basically laid them all off over about a 6-month, 9-month period. And then and then it was interesting because it was like a friend of mine described, the best way he described to me, he said, I felt like it was my fault, and then I realized, what can you do? I mean, there's nothing, at some point, there's nothing you can do. And I've always been an entrepreneur, since I was a kid, and I was always able to solve problems. Being an entrepreneur is a really, what you're doing is you're solving problems. If it was easy, everybody else would be doing it, right? As one problem after the other occurs, and you got to be nimble, and you got to pivot where you need to pivot, and make changes where you have to make changes, and do whatever you have to do to get over the next hurdle. There's always hurdles. And all of a sudden, it was kind of the first time in my life, there was no solution. It was like, I had this huge brick wall. I go, I don't know where to go from here. But a friend of mine described, he says, it's kind of like, we're out skiing. Buddy I ski with a lot. We do a lot of backcountry skiing and powder skiing and that kind of thing. He says, it's kind of like we're out skiing this beautiful blue crystal day, and it's pretty good conditions, and all of a sudden an avalanche starts, and it just drops out from under you. And what do? You're just trying to survive. That's all you're trying to do. It's survival. And that's exactly what it was like. And I had other guys coming to me and said, what do you do? I go, just try and keep figuring something out, And what we ended up doing is we ended up losing 7 or 8 projects to banks. And they didn't want them either. But I was trying to be very cooperative with the banks and tried to help them through the project, because it wasn't their fault, it wasn't my fault. And sometimes people get in situations like that, and they kind of give the bank the finger and say, "Too bad," which is a really bad way to deal with it. I did very, very best to help make it easy on the banks. Again, they were not excited about taking over, but I didn't. There was nothing they could do, nothing I could do. And that was, I think, real important, because I had several banks that came back to me later and said, "Hey, we want to buy back this project." And normally they don't ever do that, but because we had been cooperative, we were able to buy some projects back, and then we went back to the FDIC, and when they had taken over some of the banks and bought back several projects directly from the FDIC for 10 cents on the dollar in many cases. And, so things, but initially it was like crap, you were buried on the avalanche, you got to kind of dig your way out and get your head to the surface. And then now what are you going to do?
Yeah, exactly.
And then about October of 2008, when September, October, when Lehman Brothers got taken over, and really Wall Street crashed too. I mean, real estate was the first kind of link of the chain that started dropping out of the economy, and that just started dragging everybody else with it. Another friend of mine described it, says, it's kind of like got 6 or 7 guys or climbing a mountain. We're all linked together by rope, and the top guy falls first. That was you, me, and then the next guy falls, and the next guy falls, the next guy falls, and everything else. And then it became this chain reaction. The whole economy, crashed and cratered, and it was interesting because I'd always wondered what I would have done if I'd been alive in 1929 when the Great Depression hit. My grandfather was a real estate developer, interestingly enough, in Rexburg, Idaho.
Really?
And he actually built part of Main Street in Rexburg, and some buildings that still stand in Rexburg, Idaho today. And after World War I ended, there was a big depression, and he went broke and got an insurance business, moved to California, and basically became super depressed. I think they didn't diagnose as depression then, but that's a diagnosis now, and died pretty young. I think in his 40s or something. Never really recovered from that. And I always wondered, what would I have done if I had been if I'd been in business or around in the Great Depression, and all of a sudden it was my chance. Here I was, what am I going to do now? And then for me, interesting enough, when everything else collapsed, it actually started to become a little easier for me, because all of a sudden I realized, okay, it's not just me. I'm not the only dumb piece of crap out here. I had investors said, "Oh, this is bad management. You guys just totally screwed things up." Go, yeah, I mean, I'm sure we could have done things differently, not doing deals. That's what we could have done differently, not being in business. The best thing we could have done is not be in the home building business, particularly. But I started kind of seeing the light a little bit when everything else crashed. I thought, okay, there's got to be some opportunities out here. And started kind of looking around. And for me, it's kind of started getting a little bit better in the late fall of 2008. And I'd always kind of subscribed to Warren Buffett's philosophy that when when you see fear in people's eyes, be greedy, and when greed in people's eyes, be fearful.
Exactly.
I've kind of changed that a little bit. I'd say when I see fear in people's eyes, be opportunistic. I don't like the word greedy because I don't think greedy is good. But so I started looking around, and interestingly enough, started seeing these kind of lists of homes that people were buying, all these foreclosed homes, and kind of looked at. I had several groups approach us, myself and a partner, and about maybe buying some of these lists. I never saw anything that I thought looked very good until about a year later. In the meantime, in 2000, from about 2001 to 2011, I taught a real estate class at BYU, and a real estate investing and developing class. And one of my former students, partners, actually, interestingly, after a BYU football game in the fall of 2009, was coming over and started telling me that they were buying foreclosed homes in Florida mostly, and Indianapolis and some other areas. And he told me his partner was a guy named Joe Haymore, and I said, Joe Haymore was in my real estate class, and he said, yeah, that's my partner. I said, you kidding me? So I called Joe. I said, Joe, tell me what you're doing. And he said, yeah, I was buying these properties. And I thought, oh, okay. And the light went on. Okay, now, since everything else had collapsed, maybe now is the time to be a buyer instead of a seller. I was we were building and selling homes prior to that. And so we started looking at it and put some investors together, and we ended up going in with Joe, and we ended up buying like 100 homes, and then we
single family.
Yeah, single family detached homes, Indianapolis, Kansas City, and then I thought this is an opportunity, and ended up through another mutual friend met Ryan Boffman, who had been in New York, worked with Toll Brothers, and went to Columbia and got an MRAD. Wanted to move out to Utah, mostly because he wanted to get married, because he dated every eligible LES girl in New York City, and he came out here and was interested in starting up. And he and I met and literally spent about an hour together and came up with a kind of a business plan to start buying homes, and agreed to become partners. And that was in late fall of 2009. And we've been partners ever since. It's been 16 years now, and I love him, and we've had a great relationship, and brought on several other partners over time. And now there's actually, at one time we had 6 partners with Sundance. That was the beginning of Sundance Bay.
Really? Yeah. That's when it was born.
Yeah. So then we started buying homes. We ended up doing, and we figured rather than just buying and flipping, we bought and fixed up homes, and we sell some, we kept a bunch in Florida. And so it turned a lot. I was ended up doing like 400 or 500 homes in Phoenix, Las Vegas, Indianapolis, Kansas City, kind of the areas where the market was the worst, and Florida. And that worked out quite well. I mean, we didn't do spectacular, but we did pretty decently.
Yeah, that's great.
And then interest rates had come way down in the meantime, and we thought, I kept saying to Ryan, I said, we need to, rather than turning and selling these things, we need to start taking advantage of low interest rates, lock in some interest rates. Let's start buying apartments. And interestingly enough, another former student came to me and said, hey, my dad has an apartment building in Madison, near Madison, Wisconsin, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. And he's kind of at odds with his partner, and the bank's foreclosing on him. Would you be interested in maybe buying an apartment? And so Ryan and I flew out there and walked through the apartment and looked at it and said, yeah, this is a good opportunity. We could do the same thing on apartments as we do in single family homes, but get long-term financing for it. And then we had to make it, the bank didn't want to land at all, but we ended up making a deal with the bank that we put in enough operating expenses, property tax, and interest into escrow with the bank, 2 years worth of everything covered. So they were completely risk-free. In escrow with the bank for 2 years of operating expenses, interest expense, and everything else.
What year was this?
This was this would have been about 2011.
Okay, so 2011, the banks were still super skittish.
Banks weren't touching. They weren't touching real estate. If you went to them, talked to a bank about a real estate loan, the bank would start shaking and getting fits. I mean,
2011.
They couldn't do loans. Banks still couldn't do loans, real estate loans, and FDIC dictated a lot of that because they still had too many loans on the books and they had to get rid of stuff. Anyway, that was the deal we made with the bank. The bank said yes. We ended up buying the property. It was a 96-unit apartment building and fixing it up. And, we bought it for like, I don't know, $2 million for a almost 100-unit apartment building and fixed it up. And refinancing it a few years later, the value was about $4.5 million. And kept that ended up holding that property for quite a while. And then we started buying other apartments, other properties, and we had some assisted living centers. We had several of some other guys and I had developed in Henderson, Nevada, and Mesa, and Arizona, and we had. I kind of had the light come on one day. I thought, we could sell one of these 10th Row Exchange into apartments because there's more opportunity apartments that they'd crashed in value quite a bit as well. Ended up buying like 5 or 6 apartments, and then we had several other partners joined us at that time, and the rest is history.
That's amazing.
And it's been great, and it's been a good run. And then because we couldn't get any debt, because banks weren't lending, we started our own debt fund. We said, let's become our own lender. So we had our equity side and our lending side and kind of put them together, and we became our own lender. And I had been doing private lending just kind of on a onesie and twosie basis, started in the mid-'90s and kind of had learned that business a little bit. And that we started with about $1 million in our debt fund, and over the next 5 years grew it to, I think it took us about 4 years to get to 10 million. And then brought another partner on, Mike Nixon, who's been a fantastic partner, and joined us, and we continued growing it from there. And now we're about, I don't know, a little over 900 million now.
That's insane.
It's been a great run.
That's great.
A great run. So we have an equity side and a debt side, and anyway, that's kind of the long story of how that happened. But I think it's a good example of, you got to be nimble. I mean, I became, from being a seller of real estate to a buyer of real estate, and being, selling new homes to buying old beat up homes. It just, where the market, you got to kind of go where the opportunity is. Yeah. I always say you got to zig when everybody else is zagging. If you go where everybody's going, and it's probably not going to be a great opportunity. You got to go against the crowd.
I agree.
And I think you got to be kind of counter-cyclical that way.
Sure.
When other people see fear, be opportunistic.
I love it. Well, I appreciate you sharing that story, Stan. Like, that's a great example of how to adjust 100%. And I want to dive into some more of those details, but I want to first rewind to that beginning side. When you first made that shift into entrepreneurship, when you were, it sounded like as a financial planner, things were going well, correct?
Yeah, it was a good business.
So out of college, you had built financial planning, and long story short, you said, hey, entrepreneurship is what's calling my name. Real estate development is what's calling my name. I'd love to hear your side of how that conversation went with your wife, because you mentioned you were married at this time, right?
Right. Well, I started the financial planning firm prior to being married. So
cool.
I started that. And then I got married a little later. I was almost 27 when I got married. And my wife was quite happy with financial planning. We were doing well, and
stability.
And we were doing we were building Jamestown Square at the time, and I wasn't happy doing financial planning. I felt like I wanted to do something more creative, and that I love the real estate development world because you kind of create value out of nothing. Kind of, you have an idea and take that to fruition. You can actually see the fruits of your labor, which is nice. And her dad was a small business owner, actually a mortician. They own a mortuary down in Southern California, this famous Sponberg mortuary for people who are down in that area. And so she was reasonably on board. I mean, she says, I want you to be happy, And I kind of lost passion for financial planning, and I became passionate about real estate. And so, so we got to kind of pull on our horns, and we actually sold We had built 2 homes of our own. We sold our home and moved into what we lovingly called the double wide, which is a little square house. We bought it for I think $90,000 and did a fixer upper on that.
Yeah.
And which helped. We said we got to pull in our reins because we're starting kind of a new business here, and oftentimes takes 2 or 3 years or 4 or 5 or who knows how long before you actually start making income on it. And but she was willing to do it, and said, let's do what I have to do, and let's try and build another house here. We actually bought another lot. Anyway, she was supportive of the idea. It was no fun for her to see me kind of not
moping.
Kind of the light was out of my eyes a little bit, and I was just tired of financial planning. The thing I got most tired of in financial planning was I think that when the 87 stock market crash kind of hit, is I felt like we were putting investors in things that I had no control whatsoever over. I mean, in real estate, you don't have control over macro markets, but you do have control over, the decisions you make on a project, how you do it, how you build it, what you do. You don't have 100% control, but you have a fair amount of control. In stock market, you have no control. You buy it and you hope. You spray and pray. And I just that uncertainty of putting investors in investments that I had no control over, or in like real estate investments that had the other managing partners general partners would manage it, and when things got bad, they just bail and left us holding the bag, investors holding the bag. I said, I'm never going to do that. I said, if I'm going to bring in investors, I want to have at least some degree of control over what happens. And my wife and I talked about it a lot, and she says, let's do it, And so I think it was about in May or June, I told my partner in financial planning a few months before of something like, I think it was 2000 or 1990, I think it was, he left and stepped into another great unknown. It's a lot harder to do it when you're married than when you're with kids than when you're single.
For sure.
When you're single, it's like, nothing to lose, big deal.
Just survive yourself.
Exactly. Yeah. But when you're family, you got to kind of look after the downside, what's going to happen. But we kind of built a little bit of a base between Jamestown and our video business that we had, some income, a modest amount of income coming in. So it wasn't complete, 100% just hold your breath and dive.
Yeah.
But I think that, it's hard to be married to an entrepreneur, because it's uncertainty. You work a lot longer hours, when you have a business, you're never a 9-to-5-er.
You're not clocking out.
No, you're 6 a.m. to midnight lots of times for a long time. Mm-hmm. And even after things, you maybe if things going reasonably well, there's a lot of long, hard times and ups and downs. And it's important that your wife and family are kind of on board with that.
For sure.
Because they guarantee there's going to be some difficult times, and just about everybody in virtually every business has that kind of the come to Jesus moment. Okay, am I going to continue with this, or or is it time to shut it down?
Yeah.
And so I think talking with your spouse a lot about not just the broad views, but my wife has always been very involved. I always give her a rundown on virtually every day and kind of what happened and who we're working with and what we're thinking. And she's always been a very integral part of the business. It's not some of the details are, she doesn't get into some of the details, but there's enough of the details that she kind of understands and can really be a great counselor and be a great advocate, one way or the other. And I think it's really important to be really open with, both the difficulties and the upsides, downsides. And because your wife, women have, or spouse, not just men and women, they have a different perspective on things. And lots of times before I entered into many partnerships with people, because in real estate especially, you do a lot of partnerships. I would a lot of times will go to dinner with them or have with my wife. Yeah. Because she had an intuition that sometimes I didn't have. And sometimes after we're done at dinner, it's just, what do you think? It's just, he's a scumbag. Don't do it. Really? I thought he was a pretty good guy, had a good golf swing, we've had fun playing golf. And he says, nah, and that's great. She would pick up on things that I wouldn't necessarily pick up on. And that's been invaluable.
That's so cool.
And as a counselor, as a kind of a semi-silent partner, I also think it's also important in partnerships to not have the spouses get too involved in with the other spouses, especially because every spouse thinks that their spouse is the one that's doing all the work. Yeah. And what's the other partner doing? I mean, it happens all the time. Is that, well, my husband's doing this, because all they see is their side of it. Exactly. They don't see. So I think it's important to to be careful about that.
That's smart. Well, talk to me. As an entrepreneur, as someone has been in the real estate investment world for the past 7 years, I've had my fair share of losses, some that I thought I would never recover from, but I have never been through 2008. And you talked to me about curling up in a ball and the adversity that I can only imagine. And when you were probably assessing your risk at the very beginning of jumping in, I'm sure you couldn't have painted a worse picture, right, of what 2008 brought. So talk to me about how that went with your wife, your family. I'd love to hear how you were battling that at home, not just on the business side.
And my wife would give me pep talks every morning. Seriously.
Really?
Oh man. It was like, because sometimes when reversals happen, for the first, I say 6 months, especially, it was like, what do you do? I don't know what to do. It was the first time I couldn't solve a problem. But she said, we would talk for a long time, and she'd say, we talk about all possibilities and alternatives and what, which way to go and how to maybe try and salvage a project or two. And like I said, we ended up salvaging 3 or 4 projects, maybe four-ish out of 14 or so. And I think, again, talking through it, and she was my number one advocate. She says, you can do this still. You're not stupid. You didn't cause this. I mean, it was invaluable. That she would kind of get me up and pump me up and push me out the door. Sure. Okay, what are you going to do today? What are you going to do, and how are you going to do it? Yeah. And we'd come back and we'd talk about it at night, and so she was involved in really every detail as far as when we started Sundance Bay and when we started buying houses. And has been really throughout our career. And that's why I think it's really important. Sometimes guys kind of have this attitude, don't let the little lady, don't worry her head off, about it. And again, this is not to be misogynistic, because there's a lot of women, that are in business as well. Mm-hmm. I'm just speaking from my perspective, and their husbands can be really great advocates with them as well. So it works both ways. I think it's really important to be really open and make sure they're involved. I mean, sometimes it's also easy, I think, from an ethical standpoint, ethical questions, to not kind of get people don't bring it up with their spouse, so they don't really want them to know, or they kind of don't want their opinion. I think it's really important to ask their opinion. What do you think about this? Do you think this is the right thing to do? Am I being fair with this person? And they're going to have a little bit different perspective on it. And I think it's really important. I think people will make a lot less mistakes, both ethical mistakes as well as business mistakes and things, when they're really open and discuss things with their spouse.
I like it.
And as far as with the kids go, when 2008 hit, my one son was on a mission, and I didn't tell him too much because I didn't want him to worry about, he couldn't do anything anyway. My other son, my oldest son at the time, was at BYU, actually had been in my real estate class, and he was debating between going to medicine and going into business, going to MBA or medical school. And in 2008, I said, go to medical school. Yeah. I said, as a doctor, you can always do business. But as a businessman, there are, in the medical world, it's not nearly as cyclical. Mm-hmm. In fact, people get more sick. People have more medical problems during downturns, interestingly enough, during economic downturns.
Interesting.
So it's kind of counter-cyclical.
Yeah, exactly.
But in business, there are ups and downs. It's just the nature of the beast. There's going to have ups and downs. So I think it's important to kind of prepare for when you have the 7 years of plenty. Get ready, because there's going to be some years of famine too.
For sure.
And there is. It's just, it is the nature of the beast. I like there's a Texas bumper sticker back when the last oil boom that went around that said, "Oh Lord, give me another oil boom, and I promise I won't piss it away next time."
That's funny.
And I see a lot of guys, and gals, but mostly guys, that when things are great, they think they're always going to be great. And they go out and buy the hottest car around, or 2 or 3 cars, and get the boat and get the, do this, do that, and the other, and kind of living high on the hog. I think it's always going to be that way. It's not always going to be that way. They're always in some cases it may be.
Yeah.
Depending on what kind of business, or if you get a big exit, and walk away with $100 million or more, if you're smart, you can be okay. Although I've had friends that have had exits like that and were broke 4 or 5 years later. I go, what happened to it all? It was high living in many cases.
That's
or bad
insane.
investments. Sometimes you think that you once you've done it once, that you think you know it all and you've cracked the code, and anybody else who hasn't, is just stupid.
Exactly.
And being successful in business requires a lot of hard work, good ideas, and good timing.
100%. And
I think in real estate, I used to always subscribe by the idea that in key to real estate is location. I think now it's more timing.
Makes
and
sense.
location. Location is important too.
Yeah.
But timing is important, is everything. And anyway, so I think bringing I talk to my kids a lot. I say, things are tough right now, and we got to pull on our horns. And my son he ended up going to medical school. And I said, you know what? I can't help you much now.
Yeah.
We planned on helping his way through medical school, and we're broke. I literally had zero income for 3 years.
Oh my goodness!
And in fact, I was looking at my Social Security report, because every year I don't collect Social Security yet, but at some point I will. But every year you get this report on Social Security, and I was looking at it the other day, and I saw 2009, 2010, 2011 at zero income. Gosh. I kind of forgotten about that.
Yeah.
And we sold some assets, but also fortunately before 2008 hit, I'd had lines of credit. I paid my lines of credit off. And I didn't have much debt, personal debt at all. Had a lot in the business, but very little personally, and that saved our bacon. We were able to kind of dog paddle through. And I think the other thing I'd make say about with family and your spouse is that I think it's important to have separate financial statements. Most guys in business will have joint financial statements with their spouse. And I think it's important to have separate financial statements because we live in a litigious world, and sometimes if a spouse gets sued, if you have separate financial statements, you can kind of preserve the other spouse's assets. And if you have everything in joint tenancy, then everything's exposed. And fortunately, my wife and I had separate financial statements from the late 80s. So years ago, we always had separate assets. She owned her home. I never owned a home. She owned a car. I owned my car. She owned some of our income properties, and I owned our development properties. And that was she became our lifeboat, because I was broke. I mean, I went from probably a 20 million positive net worth to 40 million negative net worth over 90 days, literally, because all these personal guaranteed loans all became massive liabilities because the values had dropped so much. And she had gone down a lot too, but she still had a little bit.
Yeah.
And she became our lifeboat. She was our first investor.
That's insane.
And initially, he was our only investor.
Yeah.
When Ryan and I started, and then we had some other investors that joined us. I might say one other thing on that point. I think it's one reason why it's important. Again, when times are good, and when times are always, treat your investors. Most people have investors that work with them, partners and others. Treat them right. Be fair with people. Be open with people. Be transparent. Don't try and hide things. And always be fair. And my motto has always been, really, it's kind of the golden rule: do unto others as others have do unto you in business, and treat people the way you want to be treated. And you build trusting relationships. And because when times are tough, and it happened with us, is that I had to try and get going again, needed some capital, and I had a pretty good pool of investors still who were good friends and we'd done things together, and we'd done well together. In some cases we hadn't done so well, but because you're not always going to win every time.
100%.
But so when there's some opportunities arose, was able to take advantage of those opportunities. Have made some calls to, 4 or 5 friends and fellow investors and said, "There's an opportunity here." For example, I had one of my former students came to me, and this was about in 2011 or I think 2011, 2012. In 2011, I think it was, when the market had bottomed out. Well, you didn't know if it bottomed out, but in hindsight, it had bottomed out.
For sure.
And he said, "Hey, there's 44 lots over in Springville, developed lots, and I think we could buy for like $18,000 a lot." At that time, it cost like 70, 80. The lots had been worth probably $80,000 a lot. The cost to develop was $60,000 a lot, and I think we'd buy those. This was on a Thursday, and I said, "Let's go take a look at them." It was Friday. I looked at them. Friday afternoon and Saturday, and Sunday, I called half a dozen friends, or a dozen friends, and some of them couldn't do it, some couldn't, some could. I said, we probably need about $1 million. There's an auction on Monday, and we got to go to auction to buy these lots. And on Monday, we went to the auction, we bought the lots, 44 lots for $18,000 a lot. And I said, I don't know how long it's going to take to turn this thing around, but at $18,000 a lot, we can do fine on this eventually. I don't know when. And the next day, we closed on Tuesday. Wednesday, I left for a river trip in the Grand Canyon, because I've been a river guide in the Grand Canyon forever, and to run a river trip, 14 days off grid, no phone calls, nothing. You can't do anything when you're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. And on the way down, called a couple builder friends and asked them if they'd be interested in buying these lots. Made a deal with Rick Salisbury and Salisbury Homes. Rick's a great guy. He's a tough, rough guy, but he and I have been friends over the years. We'd done other deals together. We had a good relationship, and called Rick, said, "Hey, Rick, you want to buy these lots?" And at that time, the market was dead still, but he says, "Yeah, let's make a deal." I basically made a deal where I'm driving down to the Grand Canyon to buy these lots over. If it takes 3 years, take 3 years or 4 years or whatever it takes, and eventually, and I came back from the Grand Canyon. And my lawyer had papered it up, and we were ready to go. But that all happened because I had trusting relationships with partners, because we treated each other well.
I love it.
And investors, and I think it's really important. Anyway,
well, you lost $60 million of net worth in 2008. If you went from
plus 20 to minus 40.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So the question I have for you, you lost $60 million of your net worth in 2008. How does I went from positive 20. So once you're zero, you're zero. Yeah,
right?
Exactly. So you lost $20 million of your net worth in 2008.
And $60 million of value, because between the company and all these projects we had collapsed in value.
Yeah.
Collapsed.
That's insane to think about. So you lost $60 million of value in 2008. You went through 2008. How do you feel like today's market compares? What's your hindsight of today's market?
This is a tough market. It's a difficult market. Values have come down. In the office world especially, values have probably dropped by 30, 40, 50, 60, 80%. And apartments have dropped by 20, 25%. Pretty much almost every asset class, except for residential homes here in Utah. In most areas, residential homes have held pretty well, single-family, detached homes. But income properties dropped because cap rates have gone up and values have come down. And this is a tough market, but I tell people all the time, and guys are in the market, go, this is nothing compared to 08. And it's a lot better than even in 01, when the stock market crashed. Real estate crashed then too, but not nearly as bad as this time. But we'll get through it. Things are going to get better. My guess is those values are probably I think we're probably pretty close to the bottom somewhere. It's always easy to identify the bottom in hindsight, but when you're in the middle of it, you don't know.
Exactly.
That's why, I think Einstein once said, the obviousness of any decision is inversely proportional to after which that decision has been made. It's really obvious looking back. Well, of course, I mean, when I was teaching real estate class again in 2011, 2012, and students said, well, of course it was going to drop in weight. No, it didn't look. I mean, I was worried because the values had gotten super inflated, but I don't know that values had gotten super inflated this last time around. I'm personally a little pessimistic about interest rates. I don't know that we're going to see 2% and 3% interest rates again. I think with the debt, I think it's a big deal. I think that none of the politicians are willing to tackle that. Doesn't matter, Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever. Nobody wants to deal with it. They just hope it will go away. It's not going to go away. It's getting worse. So I worry a little bit long term that interest rates are not going to come down. But I think we could live with, we got 6% interest rates ish, 6, 7, 8. We lived with it before. I think we live with it again. So I think it's probably time to start tippy-toeing back in the market again.
I love it.
We're looking at opportunities right now. We haven't bought anything for a couple of years, but I think that we're somewhere near the bottom. I don't know exactly where, but I think it's important in real estate in particular that you got to look at it as a long-term investment. You can't look at it as a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. I mean, during the past, since 2010, if anything you bought from 2010 on, it's done pretty well the past 7 years. And we all think we're geniuses, exactly. Right? Everybody's a genius when the market's going up. But as Warren Buffett says, you can also tell who's swimming naked when the tide goes out, right?
I like that.
Those are the guys that are out, living high, and all of a sudden the tide goes out and you go, oh crap, exactly. Now what? And that's why I think it's important, have the family be part of that, because you just can't. You got to prepare for the rainy day, because rainy days will happen.
Yeah,
and they do happen.
Yeah, it's funny from my perspective. I've said this for the past 5 years. I'm trying not to be naive. It feels like it's been too good to be true, especially in the residential space that I'm in, 4 units and below. It feels like there's loom coming because it's been so smooth. But Stan, with people that know you and what little I know about you, one of the first things that always comes up is how active you are and that you've always been. Talk to me about the importance of health in general.
I'm a little OCD. My wife calls it ODD. I started really like running, kind of got into running and biking back when I was in school at BYU, and ran my first, I think, 10K or something when it was a homecoming road race, and I couldn't walk the next day, literally, because I'd never run before. But I decided when I graduated from school that I wanted to maintain a certain level of fitness, because statistically, in the United States, the average American gains about 1.5 pounds a year, which is just about 2 ounces. 2 ounces a month from the time they graduate from whatever school they end up graduating, whether it's high school or college, whatever it is. They gain about, call it 1 to 2 ounces a month. 1 ounce is not much, right? Especially one milkshake, maybe two, and by the time the average American is in the mid-40s, they're about 20, 25 pounds overweight, And I had read that, and I said, what? I'm going to see. I see if I can break that average, And so I started running, and then I kind of started getting into biking, and I was actually on a Grand Canyon river trip with one of my buddies that started doing triathlons. The early days of triathlons is in the early 80s. And he said, pick up swimming and do a triathlon. I go, what's a triathlon? And he said, told me bike, swim, run. I said, okay, that sounds pretty cool. So I started swimming a little bit and did my first triathlon up at Heber. Anyway, and I liked it. It was fun. And I found I was actually fairly decent at it. And so this is like in my, mid-20s, but 27, 28, I think I did my first triathlon. Anyway, and it just started developing a habit of working out every morning, and did some weightlifting as well. Kind of threw that into the mix, and I started. And this is kind of relates back to family. When Connie and I first got married, I'd go for a run or bike ride like in the evening after work. And then realized very quickly that wasn't going to work because you're gone all day and then I leave and that sucks. And so I wasn't a morning person, but I forced myself to become a morning person. And I'd go out. I usually get up about 6 o'clock, and I'd run or bike or swim pretty much every morning. Go out at 6:15, about the door, and for an hour. I pretty much limited to about an hour. And then on Saturdays, I'd maybe do a long bike ride or a long run. Longer, and because I wasn't doing real long distances at that point, but I found I was, the longer the distance, the better I was competitively, and kind of got into it. And over a period of time, I probably got into it too heavy. And in hindsight, I ended up doing my first full Ironman. I'd been a bishop at BYU, and I was like 31 when I got released at 35. I thought, I've got 20 hours extra time a week. So I thought, now's the time to do it. I'd try and do an Ironman. And then I did my first Ironman. And I ended up doing 5 full Ironmans and 10 halves and about 30 or 40 regular ones. I've done a ton of road racing, 20 marathons, St. George. I've done Boston a couple times. I was in Boston the year of the bombing, which is a whole nother story. And it just been pretty uber active, What
does that look like today? Because you're still, you're talking about stories in the past, but we all know, Stan, that you are doing crazy things today, right? What does that look like at your age today?
I just turned 69, and I did a triathlon Saturday. My son and I, some of my sons have, and one of my daughters has done a couple of triathlons with me as well. We've done like Bernie Spudman and a couple of. We did the Jordan Hill triathlon Saturday, and I won my age division, 65 to 69. Guess how many were in my age division?
How many?
Me. I was the only one. Which is kind of the point. Is that most guys, it's kind of a battle of attrition. Most people, kind of start winding down. And I'm still hard at it. It's very rare that I don't run, bike. I don't swim that much. I swim if I'm going to do a race. I'll swim for this last race. I swam 3 times before the race.
What are those distances for your triathlon?
I got into trail running. I used to do a lot of road racing and I had a coach and worked out the track and trying to get my speed up and trying to break 3 hours in a marathon, which I eventually did, and doing 17, 18-minute 5Ks and stuff, which is not world class by any means, but it's pretty good, And I would do pretty well in my age division and pretty well overall. But I decided one day that I was going a little bit overboard on it, and to the neglect of my family. And I remember one day I was actually in the middle of a race, and all of a sudden it hit me. This is probably in my maybe late 30s, early 40s. and I thought, I'm never going to win any money at this. What am I mean, if I to knock off 2 minutes on a triathlon, I'm going to have to spend 2 hours more a week.
Yeah.
And that's dumb, Guys ask me all the time, so if you're, what would you recommend to a guy my age, a guy in his 30s, say, that wants to do an Ironman? I say, well, how many kids do you have? He said, I got 3 kids. How old are they? 5 to 12 or something like that. I said, you know what I'd recommend? I'd recommend you don't do an Ironman. Seriously. I say, do half. Half, you can train for half and do that, and you can do that in 7 hours a week, or an international distance like I did Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
An hour a day, you can do fine in a race like that. You're not going to win any money at it. Who cares? But keep in balance. Honestly, I think there was a period of time I kind of got a little out of balance. I spent too much. I kind of became obsessed with it because I was doing pretty well. And I thought, I'm going to try and qualify for Hawaii, the Hawaii Ironman. And my first Ironman, I think I did like 11:39. And I thought, I can do it in 10:30 and I can qualify for Hawaii, knock off an hour. But I started thinking, okay, I can probably spend another 4 hours a week from maybe, I was probably spending the time maybe 7 or 8, and to spend another 4 hours a week. Why? Yeah. What's the point, And so I decided, no, I'm not going to do that anymore. Yeah. But it hit me. Yeah. I thought I'm spending too much time on it, and it kind of backed off. But I think it's really important to get a successful routine. And for me, the only way I could do it was early in the morning. And if I didn't do it early in the morning, I just didn't do it. And rarely would go on. And same thing with golf. I kind of got into golf as well. I had a buddy. We would go over to Cascade Golf Course, and we would tee off at 5:40. We'd crack of dawn, whenever crack of dawn was. 5:45 in the summer, 5:30, 5:45. We'd play about an hour and 15 minutes. We didn't run it, but we walked fast, and we would be done by 6:30, 6:40, maybe 7. Be home, help get the kids off to school. I always took upon myself I was going to run or walk the kids to school. It would drive me crazy because the elder women in our neighborhood, we lived 2 blocks away from Cascade Elementary School, and all the mostly women in the ward would in the neighborhood would drive their kids to school. It was 2 blocks away. I'm not going to do that. I said, I'm going to run the kids to school. So the kids and I would run to school.
That's amazing.
or walk, but usually we'd run. We could run to school in 6 minutes.
Yeah, exactly.
Big deal,
Quick little sprint.
And so I think that, so I tried to incorporate that with the family, and my kids we like to hike and got them into hiking. I got into trail running as opposed to road racing after a while because I found it was easy. It was more fun. Number one, I wasn't a kind of a slave to the clock because when you're really focused on time, I said I don't really care that much about time anymore. I just care about quality. Yeah. And so trail running was easier. I never run more than 3 days in a row, I never run more than 3 days a week, and never back to back. If you do just run all the time, it's easy to get injured. If you just do one thing, you get injured. Most of my friends that I used to do a lot of road racing with have had hip replacements and knee replacements, et cetera. And I've been actually very fortunate. I broke my leg mountain biking last year, but that's a whole other story. But but I think it's really important to start when you're young, develop a successful physical fitness routine, and do it. If you don't do it early in the morning, don't do it at night, And if it's gonna be on Saturday, go early Saturday. Make sure you're back in time to help with the kids and take the kids to the games. And I would always take my kids. I would do breakfast with them. I'd make a smoothie. My wife would cook breakfast for the kids. I'd run the kids to school, and just try and make sure that I'm really part of being a family,
Yeah, I love that.
And I got, the kids, I would do great hikes with the kids. I hiked out of the Grand Canyon with 2 of my kids when they were like 8 and 10, which is 13 miles, 4,000, 5,000, 6,000 foot climb, and took a couple of the kids. We did and Havasupai in the Grand Canyon, and I did lots of hikes with them, and now most of my kids are really active as well. And my wife and I have a tandem bike now. We ride a lot, which I think is related to kind of balance. Is that it's one of the best things we ever did. Is we got a tandem bike.
Really?
Yeah. It's something we really enjoy doing together. I can work out as hard as I want,
and she's
right with me.
Yeah.
Because because I've been doing this a long time, so I can still ride pretty good. Pretty well. And but if we're on a tandem together, we can stay right together.
I love it.
And we're doing a trip to France this summer, and two of my kids are coming with their spouses, and we're all going to do a bike ride through France for the summer. But I think it's important because by the time you get to 50s, especially sort of 50s and 60s and stuff, a lot of people they're way overweight. And they can't do anything fun anymore. Yeah. And I've been with young men in our church, and that kind of have this bit of a reputation of Brother Rick's just going to run you into the ground.
Yeah, I love it.
And I never take a golf cart.
Yeah, that's what you told me. You're like, you have no excuse to bring that golf cart, and I'm like, don't.
No, I mean, if I'm on a course that requires golf carts, I will. But very rare. I mean, if somebody sees me in a golf cart down at Riverside, what are you doing? What's wrong with you? I was in a hurry, didn't want to sweat today.
Exactly.
But I think staying active and maintaining activity is super important. When I go skiing, I ski with the guys I ski with regular are all in good shape, and we ski, it's top to bottom, no stopping. We'll ski morning, beginning to opening to closing. But I just have a handful of friends who can do that. Most of my friends I used to ski with from high school and college, they're good for 3 or 4 runs. And then they want to go for lunch, and I go, okay, you guys have lunch. I'm going to go skiing. I'll come back after lunch, and I'd rather ski than run. And because it's really hard to get it back again. Yeah. You can to some degree, and I've been blessed and fortunate that I haven't had any major injuries to prevent that. But even if I did, I would pick up something like that I can do. If I had any problems, I'd do more swimming. Sometimes I broke my leg a year ago. I haven't been able to run, but after I got the cast off, I can bike. So I've been biking a lot, or I can swim, or I can do more weightlifting, whatever. I just think it's really important. It makes life more fun. You can do stuff with your kids. You can do stuff with your grandkids, and do stuff with your spouse and younger people, et cetera. Yeah. You have a better outlook on life, emotionally, mentally, physically.
Mentally,
I hate it when I have friends that talk about, I'm old and creaky, and boy, I used to be able to do this, and can't do that anymore. And I'm slower. I mean, it's, I used to do sub 3-hour marathons. Now it's, if I can do 4-hour marathons, but I don't really care that much.
Exactly.
It doesn't matter.
I love it.
And it's still doing it,
And that's the important thing.
I say this race I did Saturday, won my age division. I was the only one because nobody else could do it.
Exactly.
Anyway, so I think it's a really I think a key to long-term happiness, having your health span last as long as your lifespan, hopefully.
For sure. And I love what you said about starting a routine earlier, because even in my phase of life, luckily I learned the morning routine before I had a kid, and it's been a game changer because now that I have my baby, my 7-month-old baby, time to work out after work is non-existent. I am entering my new job of watching baby, being a family man, and so the only time I can work out is before work at 5:30, 5:45 a.m. So because I developed that routine earlier, it's made it so much easier to keep my routine steady. So I love what you said there, and I think it's super important. But one last question for you, Stan, before we close. In Utah County, and I'm sure everywhere in the world, but Utah County especially, there is a large amount of people, these young hustlers that want a successful family at the same time as a successful career. What is your advice for the people in that scenario?
I would say what you make your business life and just your life revolve around your family, not have your family revolve around your business and everything else. That it always put family first. I'll drop anything to do something with one of my kids or one of my grandkids, or rearrange things or do whatever I need to do. I think, and when you're present, be present. That's really hard these days, especially with a cell phone, mobile phone. It's so easy to be sitting with the family and be on your phone. Right? My wife has to slap my hand. It happens a lot. I'm not perfect at it by any stretch, but we all do it, and we're all guilty of it to some degree. I think that, I think building a successful routine, your personal stuff you got to do, and the only personal time you're going to have is early in the morning, I found. And that's only me time. Yeah. And I think that, also sometimes we have this whole idea that we got to grow. Everything's got to go bigger, got to do more. At some point you go, you know what? Maybe they've got enough. We don't need to keep going. And there's seasons in life. When you're thick in the thick of it with kids, don't try and do an Ironman. Again, it's one of the few regrets I have of my married life anyway. And, once kids are gone, do anything, you can do it. It's not a big deal. Or whatever your Ironman is, I think that integrating your family into your business wherever possible, talking about it, and sharing, what you're doing, what the difficulties, the trials you're having, and the challenges you're facing at a given time. I started talking about that when the kids are pretty young, and having them understand what it takes, because it's really hard for the next generation. It's very. My dad used to always say, "A rich man's father is seldom a rich man's son." Mm-hmm. Or a rich man's son is seldom a rich man's father. That's how it goes. Another way of putting it is rags to riches to rags in 3 generations. Happens all the time. Share with your kids, but don't share too much. They need that struggle. It's important. The struggle is 3/4, 90% of the battle. Let your kids struggle a little bit. Don't solve all their problems for them. And share your problems with them, and they understand. It's not because kids will look at parents and say, "Oh man, hey, we have this lifestyle. This is great. It's easy." It's not easy. It's hard in most cases. So I think that making time, with the kids. I used to always put the kids to bed. I'd read them a story, put them to bed. When I could, I used to put them on the bike with me. Back before they were now they have a little chair you can put your kid on a chair like on your bike and ride with them. Back then, and everything, I'd wrap a towel around the bar or the bike and put my kids on it.
I love it.
I go mountain biking. I don't know how they did it. It was really, poor kid. Yeah. And I'd go mountain biking with them, just sitting on the frame. And I think integrate kids wherever possible, and always look for ways of integrating, them, and integrating you're having your wife be part of your business, and even if they're not in the day to day, but knowing what's going on, making sure that you spend, and when you're with them, be with them, and turn your phone off. That's really hard to do. It's the damn phone. Yep. 100%. And phone is it's our enemy in many cases. I think it's one of the biggest challenges that your generation faced. That my kids didn't have phones. They didn't have phones till they were really. Gosh, I'm trying to remember when they started getting phones. My younger kids. It was when they were in high school. But my older kids, we didn't have to deal with that. It's a lot harder, and I think having. Like I would never ever let my kid have smartphones. have a Gab phone or something like that. Put a plug for Gab. I'm an investor with Gab. They're great,
Gab's
great company.
Yeah,
it's a great company. It's great business, great mission. But be present. Be there when you're there, and don't be halfway there. And I say, and I think trying to learn to like the things your family likes. I've told my wife, I said, she kind of likes to quilt. I said, if you want me to get into quilting, I'll get into quilting. I mean, it's the last thing in the world I'd want to do. But if that's what she wants me to do, I'd do it. She likes to walk, and so we go walking. I like to bike. She doesn't really like to bike that much, and doesn't like to bike on her own. But we got a tandem bike. I highly recommend a tandem bike. Seriously, a good take your kids on rides or runs and do all sorts of stuff like that. And
I love it.
That's what I'd recommend.
Well, thank you so much, Stan. I appreciate you coming out, and I know the listeners are going to get something from this. So
great! It's great to be with you. Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you,
Hopefully
sir.
It's been useful. Thanks.
Yes, sir.